corner of 187 and Kimberly. Little Italy section of the Bronx. In front of Outro's pastry shop.
In the 1950s, this section of the Bronx, known as Belmont, was a peaceful, thriving Italian-American community also known as Little Italy. Remnants of it can still be seen today. Like many other New York City neighborhoods of the time, Italian organized crime, also known as the Mafia, was a way of life here, especially during the 1950s. Although portrayed as a secret society, the Mafia would sometimes make itself public when engaging in their illicit activities. Such was the case on July 21st, 1950, when future Genovese member Rudy Santobello, a captain based out of this neighborhood, ended the life of police officer Alfred Loreto during an attempted kidnapping. Santobello would be promptly arrested and in 1951 sentenced to life in prison for the rub-out of Officer Loreto. At that point, it seemed as if Rudy Santobello's future had been written. However, in 1966, the U.S. Supreme Court would reverse Santobello's conviction, and he would be released from prison, allowing him to continue his criminal activities and eventually rise to the position of captain within the Genovese crime family. But how? How did a known member of organized crime get released from prison after assassinating a cop? Let's find out. I'm your host, Tony Handsome, and this is Corruption Connection.
But we found there's a strong connection.
I would rather deal with organized crime than disorganized crime. Because in disorganized crime, everybody's out there doing whatever they wanted to do. In organized crime, only certain people can do it.
Rudy Santobello was born on September 6, 1928 in the Bronx and quickly gravitated to a life of crime. In his younger days, Rudy was relied on by the local members of organized crime for debt collection and strong-arming those debtors who refused to pay. On July 21, 1950, Santobello was doing just that. Alongside his crime partner, Joseph Corbo, Rudy was tasked with collecting a debt owed to the mob by a neighborhood butcher named Ralph Squeglia. At approximately 7:45 p.m., Santobello and Corbo would see Ralph Squeglia in his Buick outside his home on Herring Street here in the Bronx. They quickly approached Squeglia's automobile on each side and forced their way inside the vehicle, demanding to know why the debt had not been paid. Obviously taken by surprise, Squeglia was overpowered by the two men and found himself in the middle of them, while Santobello was in the driver's seat and Corbo was seated in the passenger seat. Trying to think of a way to escape, Squeglia suggested that Santobello should drive the car away from his home so that his wife would not hear the commotion. Santobello would drive approximately 20 feet when Squeglia made his move. An argument ensued, quickly followed by a full-blown fist fight where eventually a gun was pulled. Squeglia struggled to free himself from his two kidnappers as best as he could, grabbing the wheel and sounding the horn, eventually getting the attention of his neighbor, Alfred Loreto, a 17-year NYPD veteran who was watching the situation unfold. Loreto quickly hopped in his green Dodge and gave chase. As Loreto pursued the fleeing Buick, it abruptly came to a stop 2 blocks away as it mounted a curb on Morris Park Avenue. There are conflicting stories of what happened next. According to Corbo and Santobello, after the Buick crashed and mounted the curb, Corbo and Santobello ran towards Officer Loreto's Dodge where a struggle ensued between Officer Loreto and Joseph Corbo, leading to Officer Loreto being shot and killed. However, several witnesses who recounted the shooting to authorities stated that Officer Loreto exited his vehicle and approached the Buick after seeing it mount the curb and was shot twice, dying instantly. Regardless of which scenario is true, police would conduct a grid search and arrest Rudy Santobello and Joseph Corbo for the murder of off-duty police officer Alfred Loreto. Both men were whisked away to the 43rd precinct for questioning that lasted all night throughout the next morning. The official narrative from authorities states, after questioning 4 eyewitnesses to the abduction, shooting, and flight, the district attorney and police soon evolved the theory that Corbo and Santobello, upon fleeing the Squeglia car, had decided to take the Dodge, which had been following them, and in the course of this attempted larceny, Loreto had been killed. Under this theory, the defendants would be guilty of felony murder, for which they might pay with their lives. The only problem with this narrative was that the statement given by Santobello and Corbo in order to determine the previous night's events were made under duress, a tactic that would come back to haunt the government in the years to come. Upon arrest, Rudy Santobello was severely beaten by detectives at the 43rd Precinct in an attempt to have him admit his role in the shooting death. Joseph Corbo was detained and questioned at length with no attorney, and any admissions made were involuntary. Given the fact that Corbo was in such close proximity to hear Santobello being beaten, he was obviously intimidated. Despite the facts, both men were booked in the death of Officer Loreto. Initially seeking the death penalty, Santobello's sentence would be commuted to life in prison due to the fact that he was only 22 years old. That might have seemed like the end of Rudy Santobello's story, another mobster forgotten in the abyss of the prison system. However, Rudy's luck would change, and in 1966, after several attempts, Rudy's case made it to the Supreme Court, where his 1951 murder conviction of Officer Alfred Loreto was overturned. The reason? Lack of due process. During the interrogation of Santobello and Corbo, the government tactics were revealed to have violated Santobello's Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable search and seizure. Santobello's life sentence would be vacated, and he would immediately be released.
Hey everyone, if you're enjoying this video, please click the like button below and make sure to subscribe to the channel.
If you would like to support the channel further, please hit the super thanks icon, which can be found below each video or in the comment section below. If anyone is interested in becoming a connected member, click the join button to gain access to rare pictures of organized crime figures, untold stories, and exclusive behind the scenes footage.
Thank you. Now let's get back to Corruption Connection.
However, the police now had a target on his back, and it wouldn't be the last time Rudy Santobello would find himself in the crosshairs of the NYPD. In 1969, just a few years after his release, Santobello was arrested again on gambling charges. Interestingly enough, this case would make its way to the Supreme Court as well, where it would be used as case law in the years to come. In June of 1969, Santobello was originally charged with 2 felony counts related to gambling. After agreeing to a plea deal with the prosecutor, Santobello pled to a lesser charge, resulting in 1 year of jail time. However, by the time the case made it to court, a new prosecutor was assigned to the case and rejected Santobello's original plea agreement with the government, arguing that Santobello had a long criminal record with alleged links to organized crime and should receive a harsher sentence. Unfortunately for the government, the judge's hands were tied, and all he could do was sentence Santobello to the agreed-upon deal of 1 year in jail, a case that would make history in representing a lapse in prosecutorial procedures. Santobello's arrest would also catch the attention of Hollywood. In the 1973 film Serpico, Al Pacino would arrest and book an individual by the name of Rudy for gambling-related offenses. After a check of his criminal record, it was determined Rudy had done time for killing a cop, an obvious reference to the real-life Rudy Santobello.
He did 15 years. You know what for? For killing a cop.
After being arrested on those gambling charges, and upon his release from prison, Santobello would entrench himself even deeper into organized crime, eventually becoming a made man in the Genovese crime family, in charge of gambling and Lonsharking here in the Little Italy section of the Bronx. For the next 20 years, Santobello's star would rise in the Genovese crime family, and he was elevated to the position of captain in charge of all gambling and Lonsharking in the South Bronx and the surrounding areas, with his base of operation here in the Little Italy section of the Bronx. He ran his business from a social club just around the corner known as Club Arthur, located at 2343 Arthur Avenue. Despite his name being well known within the world of organized crime, Rudy Santobello's name was also very well known amongst members of law enforcement. He would face constant scrutiny from members of the NYPD looking for any reason to throw him back in jail, in which he would describe as borderline harassment and a vendetta against him for his involvement in Officer Loreto's death. The police were eventually successful in their endeavors in placing Rudy behind bars. On August 31st, 1994, A 13-count indictment was filed charging Santobello and 8 co-defendants with various crimes related to their association with the Genovese crime family. 5 of the co-defendants in the case pleaded guilty in exchange for reduced sentences. One of the co-conspirators was identified as Benjamin the Claw Castellazzo, underboss of the Colombo crime family, who was recently sentenced to 51 months in prison for labor union extortion in February of 2024. The other 4 men were identified as active members of the Genovese crime family operating under the direction of Rudy Santobello. The indictment would state, according to evidence at trial, beginning in at least 1990, Santobello was a capo of the family and supervised a crew from his headquarters at the social club at 2343 Arthur Avenue in the Bronx, Club Arthur. DeSalvo was an associate of Santobello's crew and often visited Santobello at Club Arthur. One of the illegal activities conducted by Santobello's crew was Lonsharking. From early 1991, Santobello and his partner Daniel Salenti made and collected extortionate extensions of credit. Evidence also showed that in August and September of 1992, Santobello used a storefront at 2500 Arthur Avenue in the Bronx to run crap games. Santobello supervised the operation, and Santobello's associates, including DeSalvo, Benjamin Castellazzo, Anthony Sedato, and Frank DeVito, handled the day-to-day management of the games. In addition, Santobello conducted a numbers operation. From Club Arthur, Santobello received wagers and reports on the winning numbers, and he calculated the payments to be made to the winners. On October 24, 1994, Santobello was convicted and sentenced to a 78-month term of imprisonment, commencing on March 24, 1995. On June 12, 2000, Santobello was released from prison and in May of 2013 would die of natural causes at the age of 85. So, are you familiar with the story of Rudy Santobello, the Genovese captain who got away with murdering a cop and whose court cases made history? Let us know what you think in the comment section below.
Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Tony Handsome, and this is Corruption Connection.